That rubber band on your desk seems ordinary, disposable, and forgettable. Yet this simple strip of elastic became deeply connected to one of history's most devastating colonial atrocities. Hidden within its stretchy fibers lies a forgotten story, so disturbing that for decades it remained largely absent from public memory across much of the Western world. That small rubber band helped build European palaces, finance a hidden colonial empire, and became deeply connected to one of history's worst colonial atrocities. Millions across Central Africa suffered and died as global demand for rubber fueled an industrial revolution powering bicycles, machinery, and eventually automobiles. How could a simple desk accessory become linked to one of modern history's most brutal colonial atrocities? The answer is more shocking than you might imagine. Our story begins not in a jungle, but in a rainy Scottish courtyard around 1887, where a father watches his young son ride a bicycle. That father was John Boyd Dunlop. Frustrated by solid rubber wheels rattling his child painfully, he set out to create a far smoother ride. Dunlop patented the first practical pneumatic tire. Almost overnight, it transformed transportation and sparked an insatiable industrial demand for raw rubber worldwide. Bicycles, factory belts, and soon automobiles all required rubber. As demand exploded, global prices soared, creating immense fortunes across Europe's industrial economy. But Europe faced one enormous obstacle. Rubber trees could not grow in its cold climate. Someone needed control of a tropical empire, and quickly. Enter King Leopold II of Belgium, an ambitious monarch obsessed with acquiring an overseas colony, not for his nation, but for his personal fortune. While rival empires claimed colonies for their countries, Leopold secured international recognition for a vast African territory that he owned as his private possession. He named it the Congo Free State. In reality, it became Leopold's private colony, covering an African territory nearly 80 times larger than Belgium. Leopold promised civilization, Christianity, and free trade for the Congo. European governments and much of the international press accepted his humanitarian claims. Behind that charitable image, Leopold secretly built a private mercenary army called the Force Publique, created to extract wealth, not deliver humanitarian aid. When Dunlop's invention ignited the global rubber boom, Leopold made a staggering discovery. His private jungle overflowed with valuable wild rubber vines. The world's hunger for rubber collided with Leopold's private empire. From that moment, an ordinary material became forever linked to extraordinary human suffering. Leopold issued a chilling decree. Every village across the Congo had to meet impossibly high rubber quotas, week after week, without exception. Harvesting wild rubber meant climbing dangerous jungle vines, slicing them open, and collecting sticky sap by hand beneath relentless tropical heat. Workers coated their own bodies with raw rubber, waited for it to dry, then painfully peeled it from their skin. That was only the beginning. Villages meeting their quotas survived another week. Those that failed faced punishments so brutal they became symbols of one of history's darkest colonial systems. Armed with modern rifles, Leopold's soldiers raided villages that missed quotas, burning homes, taking hostages, and killing civilians to enforce rubber collection. Bullets were costly, and European officers demanded proof they weren't wasted on hunting instead of enforcing rubber quotas across the Congo. A horrifying rule followed. For every bullet fired, soldiers had to present a severed human hand as proof the ammunition had been properly used. Severed hands became a gruesome accounting system, forcing soldiers to justify every bullet by turning human bodies into evidence of colonial enforcement. Historical records and eyewitness testimony describe baskets of severed hands presented to European commanders as proof that ammunition had supposedly been used correctly. While London and New York celebrated the bicycle boom, Congolese communities were systematically terrorized to supply the rubber behind that same comfortable ride. Look again at that ordinary rubber band. The material holding your papers together was once harvested through a relentless system of terror and exploitation. Meanwhile, Leopold remained safely inside his Brussels palace, watching his fortune grow while staying far removed from the violence committed in his name. Leopold poured enormous rubber profits into magnificent monuments and public parks that still stand across Belgium today, financed partly by wealth extracted from the Congo. Visitors still admire these grand Belgian landmarks, rarely realizing part of the wealth behind them came from the Congo's brutal rubber economy. For years, the outside world knew almost nothing. The dense Congo jungle helped conceal Leopold's brutal system from international attention. Leopold reportedly funded sympathetic journalists and cultivated influential allies to protect his carefully crafted humanitarian image across Europe and the wider West. Global demand for rubber kept rising. Factories needed more industrial belts, while the first automobiles rolled steadily off new assembly lines. As rubber demand surged, violence intensified across the Congo. Entire communities were devastated by forced labor, killings, disease, and widespread displacement. Men were driven to exhaustion collecting rubber. Meanwhile, women were reportedly held hostage until their husbands returned with the required quotas. Starvation spread across entire regions. With nearly everyone forced into rubber collection, few remained to farm crops or hunt for food. Disease then swept through the weakened population. Sleeping sickness alone reportedly claimed hundreds of thousands who had already survived violence and starvation. The exact death toll remains fiercely debated. Many historians estimate the population declined by millions, while some estimates approach nearly 10 million. Whatever the exact number, the demographic collapse was catastrophic. Entire families vanished, villages emptied, and countless lives disappeared from history forever. A crack finally appeared in Leopold's wall of silence. In 1897, British shipping clerk Edmund Morel noticed something deeply suspicious. Working in Antwerp, Morel watched ships arrive from the Congo, loaded with valuable rubber and other extracted colonial resources. Yet those same ships returned to Africa, carrying rifles and crates of ammunition instead of legitimate trade goods. Morel recognized the disturbing truth. This was never genuine free trade. It was a forced labor system enforced at gunpoint. He abandoned his comfortable career and launched a relentless campaign exposing Leopold's crimes. Challenging a wealthy European king, however, was extremely dangerous. Leopold invested heavily in public relations, lobbying influential politicians, journalists, and publishers to defend his carefully crafted humanitarian reputation. The public hesitated. Who should they believe? A respected European monarch? Or an unknown shipping clerk describing atrocities in a distant jungle? To break Leopold's control over public opinion, undeniable visual evidence was needed. The world had to witness the horror itself. That evidence arrived through Alice Seeley Harris, a young British missionary carrying one of the world's first portable Kodak cameras. What Harris witnessed deep inside the Congo would shatter her forever and soon alter the course of global history. Harris documented the horrors around her, capturing powerful evidence that Morell's journalism alone had never fully convinced the wider Western public. As her photographs reached Europe and America, the Congo's rubber regime faced unprecedented international scrutiny, transforming public opinion forever. She photographed starving prisoners, injured children, and villages destroyed for failing to meet Leopold's impossible weekly rubber quotas. But one photograph changed history. It remains an image so devastating that it still haunts the world's conscience today. A Congolese man named Nsala sat silently outside his home, staring at something small and unbearable lying before him. According to missionary accounts, it was the severed hand and foot of his young daughter, killed by soldiers of the Force Publique. Missionary accounts state Nsala's daughter was killed after his village failed its rubber quota, making one family's grief an enduring symbol of colonial brutality. Harris developed the photograph and secretly carried it back to Europe. Once published, it sparked immediate outrage across Britain and America. For the first time, photographic evidence helped ignite an international human rights campaign against a powerful European king once considered untouchable. Famous writers, including Mark Twain, soon joined the campaign. Yet exposing Leopold's crimes was only the beginning of the story. Mark Twain published a scathing satire attacking Leopold's public defenses. The truth about the Congo's rubber atrocities could no longer remain hidden. International pressure finally broke Belgium's resolve. In 1908, the government stripped Leopold of his private colony, ending one of history's cruelest colonial experiments. The Congo Free State was officially dismantled. You might think the story ends here. It doesn't, not even close. Leopold lost his private colony, but global demand for rubber never slowed. If anything, it only accelerated. Henry Ford's Model T brought automobiles to the masses. Millions of new cars suddenly demanded rubber tires, shifting the global scramble elsewhere. European empires expanded rubber production into Southeast Asia, clearing ancient forests to establish vast commercial plantations guarded for decades. The Congo's worst atrocities gradually declined, but exploitative colonial labor systems continued elsewhere as worldwide demand for rubber kept growing. The violence left permanent scars. An entire generation was largely erased from the historical record. Across much of Central Africa, communities endured lasting social disruption, shattered traditions, and deep economic hardship that continued affecting generations long after Leopold's rule ended. Every time you stretch a rubber band today, you're holding a material forever linked to one of European colonialism's darkest chapters. Leopold died in 1909 amid widespread criticism. Contemporary reports describe crowds jeering as his funeral procession passed through Brussels. For decades, Belgium's colonial past received little public scrutiny. Broader recognition of the Congo's atrocities emerged only gradually during the 20th century. It took decades before Belgium's colonial record faced sustained public examination. For many victims and their descendants, recognition came painfully late. Much of the wealth generated by Congo's rubber trade remained in Europe, while justice and recognition for many victims arrived far too late. Every bouncing ball, pencil eraser, and early bicycle tire carried an invisible cost, quietly paid through immense human suffering. The Industrial Revolution in the West was accelerated in part by forced labor and violence inflicted on millions across Central Africa. We celebrate inventors like Dunlop and Ford for transforming modern life, while often overlooking the hidden human cost behind that progress. Rubber became one of the industrial age's most strategic materials, powering transportation, manufacturing, communication, and expanding global economic networks. Modern industry delivered extraordinary innovation, yet parts of that transformation relied on colonial exploitation, whose human costs were deliberately concealed. They suffered so factories could keep running. Their labor fueled an industrial transformation whose benefits reached millions, far beyond the Congo. That simple rubber band is no longer just an office supply. It stands as a quiet witness to humanity's greed at its worst. History often remembers battles and generals, while overlooking how ordinary consumer goods quietly shaped human suffering on a massive scale. As you sit comfortably in your modern home, Take one last look at the ordinary objects quietly surrounding your daily life. Every object carries a hidden price. Every material has an origin story shaped somewhere between innovation and profound human suffering. What other forgotten secrets might be hiding inside your kitchen cabinets, quietly waiting for their own dark history to be uncovered? The full truth is often stranger and darker than the simplified version most of us were taught in school. If an ordinary rubber band can conceal a forgotten chapter of colonial history, what other everyday object is still waiting to reveal its story?